I always thought I was doing a good job. Actually, no, I knew I was doing a good job. Every shift I took was a shift I gave everything to. Whether it was opening early, staying late, covering for sick coworkers, or handling the customers no one else wanted to deal with, I was there. I wasn't the type to cause drama or slack off. I kept my head down and worked. That was just how I was raised. You do a job, you do it well, simple. So when it happened, when my boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon, I wasn't even nervous. I figured maybe I was getting a new responsibility, maybe even a raise. I'd been there for over 2 years, and if anyone deserved it, it was me. I remember the way he looked at me, almost like he was uncomfortable. He shuffled some papers around, cleared his throat a few times. I should have known something was off right then. But I sat there smiling like an idiot, ready for whatever good news he had. Then he said it. "We're gonna have to cut your hours starting next week." At first, it didn't even register. It was like my brain was buffering, trying to catch up to the words. Cut my hours? Why? I hadn't done anything wrong. No one said anything about performance issues. If anything, other people were slipping, calling in sick, coming in late, half-assing their work. But me, I showed up. I worked hard. I thought I was one of the people they could count on. I must have looked confused because he immediately launched into one of those long, rehearsed explanations about budget cuts and company restructuring and nothing personal. I just sat there nodding, even though inside my chest felt like it was caving in. He said it so casually, like he was telling me about the weather or a new coffee machine in the break room. "You're still a valuable part of the team," he added, like that was supposed to make it sting less. "We just can't offer you as many hours right now." Right now? Those words echoed in my head. Right now, like it was temporary, like it would get better. But the way he avoided looking at me told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't temporary. They were phasing me out. They just didn't have the guts to fire me outright. When the meeting ended, I walked out of his office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The rest of my shift blurred by. I went through the motions, smiling at customers, stocking shelves, wiping tables, all the while feeling like I was standing outside my own body, watching myself pretend everything was fine. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling for hours. Thoughts kept racing through my head. How was I supposed to pay my bills? Rent wasn't going to get any cheaper. Gas prices were through the roof. I didn't have some huge safety net to fall back on. I worked because I had to, not because it was a hobby. And the worst part, I felt betrayed. I had given so much to that place, sacrificed weekends, missed family events, stayed late without overtime because I genuinely thought it would pay off. I thought loyalty meant something. Turns out, loyalty only matters until it's inconvenient for them. The next week my schedule came out and it was brutal. From full-time to barely scraping 15 hours. 15 hours. I went from working 5 days a week to 2, sometimes 1.5 if they didn't need me that badly. Meanwhile, people who slacked off still had full schedules. People who couldn't be bothered to show up on time. People who did the bare minimum. I tried to tough it out at first. I told myself it wasn't personal, just like he said. I tried picking up shifts when I could, but there were hardly any. A few coworkers pulled me aside and whispered that they didn't understand what was happening either, that I didn't deserve it, that it was wrong. It helped a little, but not much. I started applying to other places, desperate to find something, anything to make up for the lost income. Interviews here and there, some leads, nothing that stuck. Every day that passed, I could feel my savings bleeding out a little more. And every time I walked into that building, it felt less and less like a job and more like a slow, cruel goodbye. I didn't know it yet, but that cut was just the beginning. Something was brewing beneath the surface. Something that would change everything, not just for me, but for the whole place. And when it would hit hard. At first, things at work seemed normal after they cut my hours. Well, normal on the surface anyway. People were still clocking in, doing their shifts, laughing in the break room. But there was this weird energy hanging in the air, like when you know a storm's coming even though the sky's still clear. You could feel it, a tension that wasn't there before. I wasn't the only one who noticed either. One of the first signs that things were going wrong was the schedule. It was a disaster. Shifts were understaffed constantly. You'd walk in and realize you were supposed to be working double because someone else hadn't shown up or because there literally wasn't anyone else scheduled. Customers would come in during the busy times and there just weren't enough hands to deal with them. Lines got longer, complaints piled up, orders were wrong, shelves sat empty. Phones rang endlessly because nobody had time to answer them. It was like trying to plug leaks in a sinking ship using chewing gum. Meanwhile, the people they had decided to keep full-time were not built for the pressure. Some of them cracked within days. I'd be stocking shelves or sweeping floors on one of my rare shifts and see it happening, people snapping at customers, arguing with each other, giving up halfway through their tasks. It wasn't even surprising. Management had basically set them up to fail. And yet, every time my boss, the same one who had smiled at me like he was doing me a favor, walked through, he acted like everything was fine. Fake smiles, quick nods, those same empty words, "We're all in this together, just a rough patch, we'll get through it." It was honestly kind of insulting to hear it. Then slowly but surely, the cracks started getting wider. People began quitting. Not a trickle, a flood. First, it was two of the newer cashiers, they just stopped showing up. No 2 weeks notice, no goodbye, nothing. Next was one of the shift supervisors, the one who usually kept things running when everything else was chaos. I remember overhearing him telling a coworker that he wasn't paid enough to be treated like garbage, and then a week later he was gone. Every time someone left, it was like ripping another support beam out from under a building that was already tilting. I tried not to enjoy it, I really did. Part of me still cared about the place, about the people I worked with. But there was this other part, this darker part, that felt a little satisfaction every time it got worse. I couldn't help it. It was like watching karma work in slow motion. They thought they didn't need me, they thought cutting my hours would make things better. Well, here was their better. It wasn't long before they started panicking. That's when I first noticed the desperate texts. "Hey, can you pick up a shift tonight? We're really short, can you come in tomorrow? Any chance you're free this weekend?" It was almost funny. 2 months ago, they couldn't find enough excuses to cut me back. Now they couldn't find enough ways to beg me to come in. At first, I ignored them, not out of spite, not completely anyway, but because by then I'd picked up a part-time job elsewhere. It wasn't glamorous and it didn't pay much better, but it was something. And honestly, it felt good to know that I didn't have to jump every time they snapped their fingers. Still, the texts kept coming. They got longer too, more apologetic. "We really miss having you around. You were always such a hard worker. Things just aren't the same without you." I didn't even know how to respond. Was I supposed to feel bad for them? Was I supposed to feel honored that now they realized my worth? It was a weird feeling, being wanted by the people who had thrown you away without a second thought. It made you wonder if anything they said before had ever been real. And then came the message that changed everything. It was from my boss, not some assistant manager, not a coworker, him. He didn't just ask if I could pick up a shift. He asked if I would come back, full time. "We need someone dependable," he wrote. "We need you." The message sat on my phone like a ticking bomb. I read it at least 20 times, my heart hammering harder with every pass. This was it, the moment I never thought would come. I wasn't just a backup anymore. I wasn't a last resort. They needed me. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I had all the power. I didn't reply to the message right away. I stared at it, reread it, put my phone down, picked it up again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard more times than I could count. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, not because I was excited, but because old habits die hard. I had spent so long being the dependable one that it was almost instinct to jump when called. But this time I didn't. This time I took a breath. I made myself sit with it, think about it. Because the truth was, I had options now, not great ones maybe, but options all the same. I wasn't the desperate, scrambling person I had been 2 months ago, wondering how I was going to make rent. I had another job, I had a few interviews lined up, and most importantly, I had self-respect. They didn't deserve me rushing back just because things had blown up in their faces. They didn't deserve an easy fix to a mess they created. Still, part of me wrestled with guilt. I won't lie about that. Even after everything, I still cared about some of the people working there. I thought about my old coworkers, the ones who were probably drowning trying to cover all the gaps. It wasn't their fault the management screwed up. If I came back, maybe I could make things better for them. Maybe I could take some of the weight off their shoulders. But then again, why was that my responsibility? I spent the whole evening going back and forth, packing my tiny apartment, muttering to myself like a crazy person. I thought about every late night I stayed behind without pay, every time I was asked to cover for someone else's mistake, every birthday party, every family gathering I missed because they needed me to just stay a little longer. And how did they repay me? By tossing me aside the second it suited them. No warning, no loyalty, just gone. I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. Still, I knew I couldn't ignore the message forever. If I left them hanging, it would just create more awkwardness later on. So finally, after hours of wrestling with myself, I typed out a reply, simple, polite, but firm. Thanks for reaching out, I'll need some time to think about it. No promises, no eagerness, just facts. The reply was barely 10 words long, but it felt like a revolution inside me. For the first time in a long time, I was setting the terms. The next morning, I woke up to another message. Longer this time. He understood, he said. Take all the time I needed. They'd be happy to have me back whenever I was ready. They could even offer me a slight raise if that helped. A raise. I laughed out loud when I read that part. Where was that offer when I was working double shifts without complaint? Where was that money when I was begging for enough hours to survive? It was almost funny how quickly people find the resources they supposedly didn't have when it benefits them. I went about my day feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I didn't realize how much weight I had been carrying until it started to lift. Not just the stress of money and hours, but the deeper weight, the weight of being undervalued, unseen, disposable. Now suddenly I wasn't disposable, I was necessary. And they knew it. It was tempting, I'm not going to lie. Part of me imagined striding back through those doors, head high, soaking in the looks on their faces. Part of me imagined reclaiming my spot, showing them all what a mistake they made. There was a dark satisfaction in that fantasy. But another part of me, a quieter, wiser part, whispered that going back would be like stepping into a burning house because you missed the couch. Sure, it was familiar, sure, there were good memories, but the damage was done. The fire had already torn through it, you couldn't pretend it hadn't. You could rebuild somewhere else, somewhere better. By the end of that week, I had a decision to make. Go back and pick up the pieces for them. Or move forward and find something that didn't require me to beg for basic respect. It wasn't an easy choice. But deep down, I think I already knew which way I was leaning. And it was about damn time I chose myself first. The following Monday, I got another text from my boss, this time asking if we could talk in person. He said he wanted to explain the situation better, make me a formal offer, maybe work something out that would make us both happy. I just stared at my phone, shaking my head. A few months ago, he couldn't even be bothered to look me in the eye when he cut my hours. Now he wanted a sit-down meeting like we were old friends sorting out a misunderstanding. Still, part of me was curious. I guess I wanted to hear it. I wanted to see what kind of excuses he would come up with when he actually had to say them to my face. So I agreed, one last meeting, not because I was planning to go back, but because I wanted closure. I wanted to walk out of there knowing without a doubt that I was done. I showed up about 20 minutes early because that's just how I am. Old habits, you know. The building felt different now. I mean, physically it was the same peeling paint on the walls, same buzz of fluorescent lights, same smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room, but it felt different, emptier, sadder. There were barely any employees around. The ones who were still there looked exhausted, like they were running on fumes. One girl at the register was juggling 2 customers, a phone call and a return at the same time, and you could just see it written all over her face. She was 2 seconds away from breaking. If I ever doubted how bad things had gotten, seeing it with my own eyes erased any hesitation. When my boss finally appeared, he looked different too, smaller somehow, deflated. His smile was forced and tired. He shook my hand like he was trying to convince both of us that this was a casual chat between equals, not a last-ditch attempt to save his own skin. We sat down in the little back office, and he launched right into his speech. He talked about how unprecedented the past few months had been, how unexpected the turnover was, how hard it had been to maintain operations with so many people leaving. He even threw in a half-hearted apology about cutting my hours, said it was a mistake, that they didn't fully appreciate what I brought to the team until it was too late. Then he slid a piece of paper across the desk toward me, a printed schedule and a salary offer. Full-time hours. Slightly better pay than before. Guaranteed weekends off, something I had begged for and never gotten back then. On paper it wasn't a bad offer. On paper it looked like a win. But sitting there across from the man who had cut me loose without a second thought when it suited him, I realized something important. It wasn't just about the money or the hours. It was about trust. And I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust that the next time things got tight, I wouldn't be the first one thrown overboard again. I didn't trust that the promises he was making now weren't just temporary band-aids slapped onto a broken system. I didn't trust that working here would feel any less like being invisible, replaceable, disposable. I looked down at the paper, then back up at him. I could tell he thought he had me, that throwing a few extra dollars and weekends off would be enough to make me forget everything. He didn't know me at all. I took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I'd say. "Thank you, but I'm going to have to pass." I kept it polite. I didn't burn the bridge, not completely. I just told him that after everything that had happened, I needed a fresh start somewhere else. I needed something different, something better. He tried to hide his disappointment, but it was obvious. His whole face sagged. He nodded and said he understood, but you could hear the frustration in his voice. I think deep down he was angry not just at me but at himself. Angry that he had misjudged the situation so badly. Angry that he had let things get this far. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I stood up, shook his hand one last time, and walked out of that office with my head held high. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because it really, truly felt like something had lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't that desperate, scared employee anymore. I was free. And I wasn't looking back. The weirdest thing about leaving was how quiet it was afterward. No more constant buzzing of my phone with last-minute shift requests. No more pit in my stomach every Sunday night wondering what fresh hell the new week's schedule would bring. No more walking into that building feeling like I was carrying someone else's guilt on my back. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had so much free time, so much open space in my days that it actually felt uncomfortable. I'd wake up early out of habit, pour a cup of coffee, and sit there staring at the clock, feeling like I was supposed to be rushing somewhere, supposed to be putting out someone else's fires. But slowly, day by day, that urgency started to fade. Instead of rushing off to a thankless shift, I went for walks. I read books I hadn't touched in months. I cooked real meals instead of living off whatever drive-through garbage I could grab between shifts. It felt like I was remembering how to be a human again, not just a worker bee scrambling to survive. Money was still tight, don't get me wrong. That other part-time job wasn't exactly rolling in riches, but somehow, even with the tighter budget, life felt richer. I wasn't trading my sanity for a paycheck anymore. I wasn't sacrificing my self-worth for a few extra hours that could be yanked away without warning. And then something unexpected happened. Opportunities started popping up. Almost like the universe was rewarding me for finally choosing myself. A friend mentioned that her company was hiring for an entry-level admin job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than anything I had before, came with benefits, and best of all, it respected people's time. She put in a good word for me, and 2 interviews later I had an offer. Full-time. Decent pay. Actual respect built into the culture. I could hardly believe it. After everything I'd been through, I half expected the rug to get pulled out from under me again, but it didn't. It was real. And when I walked into that new job on my first day, it was like stepping into a different world. People actually said good morning. Supervisors thanked you for your work. If you had a question, someone would stop what they were doing to help you instead of acting like you were wasting their time. It was small stuff, but after what I'd been through, it felt huge. I still thought about my old job sometimes, not with regret, not anymore, more like looking at an old scar. It didn't hurt anymore, but it was a reminder of what I'd survived, a reminder of what I wasn't willing to accept ever again. A few months after I started the new job, I ran into one of my old coworkers at a grocery store. We hadn't seen each other since everything went down. We stood there talking between the cereal aisle and the freezer section, catching up, laughing about the old days. She told me the place had only gotten worse. More people had quit. New hires barely lasted a week. Customers were angrier than ever. Management was scrambling to cover shifts, offering bonuses, even paying people to stay on, but nobody trusted them anymore. The damage was too deep. Hearing it made me sad for a minute, not for the company, but for the good people still stuck there, still holding the broken pieces together. But mostly it made me grateful. Grateful that I had walked away when I did. Grateful that I hadn't let desperation pull me back into something that didn't deserve me. Grateful that I had finally learned the hardest and most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away. Even when it's scary. even when it feels like you're jumping without a net, even when it hurts. Because on the other side of that fear and pain is something so much better: freedom, respect, peace. And once you taste that, you'll never settle for anything less again. It's strange looking back now just how much that one experience shaped the way I see things. At the time, it felt like my world was crashing down, like the floor had been yanked out from under me and I was just free falling into nothing. I remember the panic, the anger, the deep ache of betrayal. But with some distance, I can see it differently. It wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of their world for me, and the beginning of something better. I learned that just because you work hard doesn't mean you'll be valued. I learned that loyalty to a company isn't the same as loyalty to a friend. I learned that no matter how much you give, some people, some places will always take without giving anything real back. But I also learned that you have a choice. You don't have to stay where you're not wanted. You don't have to prove yourself over and over to people who are never really looking. You don't have to keep setting yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. In that realization changed everything for me. I carried that lesson with me into every new job, every new opportunity after that. I stopped second-guessing myself every time I had to advocate for better treatment. I stopped feeling guilty for setting boundaries. I stopped believing that working yourself to the bone was some kind of badge of honor. There's no trophy for burning out. No medal for letting yourself be walked on. There's only exhaustion. And bitterness. And regret. And I had gotten a big enough taste of those things to know I didn't want any more. People talk about knowing your worth like it's some cute motivational poster you hang on your wall, but it's not. It's painful. It's messy. It means making hard choices and walking away from people who don't appreciate you, even when it would be easier to stay. It means being willing to bet on yourself when nobody else will. It means believing, even on the days when you doubt everything, that you deserve better, not because you're perfect but because you're human. That old job taught me that lesson the hard way. And weirdly enough, I'm grateful for it now. Because if they hadn't cut my hours, if they hadn't treated me like I was disposable, I might never have left. I might have stayed trapped there for years, grinding myself down, wondering why I always felt so small. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you are actually the biggest gifts. You just can't see it at the time because you're too busy trying to survive it. But once you get through it, once you're standing on the other side, breathing clean air again, you realize something powerful. You're stronger than you thought. You're worth more than you ever believed. And you're never going back to the person who thought they had to settle. Not ever. It's been a while now since I walked out of that old job. Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else entirely. The person I was back then, desperate, tired, trying so hard to be good enough for people who didn't even notice, I barely recognize them anymore. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Life didn't magically get perfect once I left. Bills still came. Stress still found its way in sometimes. I still had days where I questioned myself, where I wondered if I had made the right call. But even on the hardest days, one thing stayed the same. I never once regretted choosing myself. Not once. Leaving forced me to grow in ways I didn't even know I needed to. I learned to be pickier with my time, my energy, my loyalty. I learned that it's okay, necessary, even to demand better for yourself. I learned that when people show you who they are, you should believe them the first time. I also learned that there's a whole world out there beyond the place that makes you feel small. And once you step outside of it, you realize how much you were settling for scraps when you deserved a seat at the whole damn table. My new job isn't perfect, no job is. But I'm respected here. My work is seen. If there's a mistake or a miscommunication, it's handled like adults, not used as an excuse to cut you down or cut you out. I clock out at the end of the day, and I don't carry the weight of someone else's bad decisions home with me. That's the difference. That's what peace feels like. And the funny thing is, now that I've tasted it, I can never go back. Not just to that old job, but to that old mindset. The mindset that told me I had to earn my right to be treated decently. The mindset that told me I wasn't allowed to say no. The mindset that convinced me that loyalty meant silence and sacrifice, even when it hurt. Those days are over. Now, if something doesn't feel right, I trust myself to walk away. Now, if I'm not respected, I don't stay and beg, I leave. Now, I know that my worth isn't something other people get to decide. It's something I carry with me. Everywhere. Every day. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself sitting in that office the day they cut my hours, I wouldn't tell them to fight harder or be more understanding or work even longer hours to prove something. I'd tell them simply, this isn't the end. This is your beginning. And it's going to be so much better than you ever imagined. Because it was. It still is. And if you're sitting where I once sat, feeling lost, feeling betrayed, wondering if you're crazy for wanting more, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You're not crazy. You're waking up. And trust me, on the other side of this, there's freedom. There's peace. There's a version of you who knows exactly what they're worth and refuses to settle for anything less ever again. I promise,